All right, just let me get this launched.
So are you in Los Angeles?
I'm in Los Angeles, yeah, but I am from Florida originally,
What part of Florida?
a Floridian. Even Davie, it's outside Fort Lauderdale, so I'm from even crazierville than any place else in the United States. Us
Oh
Floridians are
yeah,
special people these days.
we did a spring break in Hollywood, Florida once.
I mean, it's still the spot. It is still a happening spring break spot for, I mean, even people younger than me now. It's nuts. But what's going on? I'm going to jump us right in. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Bus Driver Experience. I'm joined by a special guest today, James Underdown. He's the executive director of the Center of Inquiry here in Los Angeles. He's got a pretty cool and interesting job. He's a skeptic, and he gets to tackle why other people may be skeptical and what gives those people reason to be skeptical, and then testing scientifically people with different scientific ideas, or people who have different theories, or even other people with paranormal effects and beliefs. So, James, thank you so much for joining me today. And did I get that whole description right? Is there a little bit more you
Yeah,
guys are
that's
studying or looking up?
that's pretty good. We investigate and test all kinds of wacky ideas and wild claims. And I mean, of course, a lot of the people who have the ideas or claim to be able to do these things don't think they're wacky. They think they're on target and sane, and it varies.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think my production coordinator, when she messaged you or your people, she was like, how do you know this guy? And it's like, well, I saw you on a Jubilee video, and you were on the side of one of the scientists versus people who believe in flat Earth.
Right.
I mean, I think I forgot what the white gentleman, what his scientific background was. I know the other one was a pretty high up there physicist, theoretical physicist, working with string theory and the foundations of the basis of life in our universe. And he's trying to sit there and have this dialogue with somebody who's just trying to tell him that has a fallacy. What he studied and what he's been put through and the rigors of scientific, uh, just the whole I would say this, like the syllabus of like following science, where you have to be studied. Your literally feet are held to a fire in order to try and figure out what is right, what is wrong, and is this actually like a law of nature that we can test and prove. And it's pretty interesting that more and more and more. I wouldn't say more and more and more. I guess the people with the voices who have no claim in science, um, seem to have the either standing on the biggest soapbox or they have the loudest voices.
Well,
I think
yeah,
we see
this is
that.
the problem. Yeah, you have it's there's a name for that. It's called Dunning-Kruger Effect, and it's all these people who think they're just as smart as the theoretical physicist that we had on the flat Earth video, and all just because you have an opinion about something or you saw a YouTube video about something, um, doesn't mean you know jack about that subject. So we're big fans of getting people who have the most education, the most experience with some of these questions, and tapping them for their expertise.
Yeah, I run into this a lot when having debates and or even just conversation. It's and I like to keep it simple. Just when someone throws me something like some very grandiose, very conspiratorial idea, it's like, oh, where did you get that information from? Who's your source? Where did you find that? What footnotes did they have in this article of where they did their study or research from to base it off of? And that's not there. And I guess the easy answer for that always is that the government doesn't want you to know, and it's not potentially possible. And I think it's such an easy answer. And I know you've done this, for 20, 30 years, trying to test people who've done these ideas at you, ask people like, hey, where'd you get these ideas or these beliefs from? Do you have anything to back it up? Have you seen it get worse or better, or, has the foundation of the internet kind of like made it a little bit more easier for people to come together with their ideas as it may be?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, the internet has been a double-edged sword. So in the last 20 years, and I'm old enough to see the internet go from almost nothing to what it is today. And so I've also seen the progress of these types of claims over those years. Back in the day, so our organization, the Center for Inquiry, has its origins in like the 1970s. In 1976 is when we started publishing Skeptical Inquirer magazine. So back then, when someone was investigating Bigfoot or Roswell, you go to Roswell and you dig up this information and you look up the records and you talk to some people and you can write a report and come to some kind of conclusion about what happened. Today, the problem is that you have people who have some of these beliefs. Let's take flat earthers as an example. And first of all, they're huge conspiracy theorists. No flat earther can be a flat earther without buying into some wacky, wild conspiracy about how the governments of the world are covering up the fact that the world is flat and not a globe, and they won't let you on the continent of Antarctica, and on and on and on. So all this stuff gets spread largely because, like you just mentioned, they can find each other. This might be 1/10% of the population, but there's 7 billion people and change in the world today. And if all the wackiest people in the world can find each other on the internet, all of a sudden they have a voice.
Yeah, it seems that it has that root in death, and us wanting to really believe that there's something else after we exist and we live. It's one of those big tough questions that we're all trying to figure out. Do we keep moving on? Is as great as our existence might be, and that we are unique as a species, that we have this doesn't stop for us, that there's some supernatural thing that has to keep going. And all these extra conspiracies seem to fall into that, like, oh, there has to be something else. It can't just be an accident. It couldn't just be this. There has to be some grandiose scheme. And for me, I wouldn't say I'm full or pledged atheist, but as someone who studied religion, I read a lot of the big religious books and read them in different contexts, and it's just where was I going with this?
You mentioned death.
Go ahead.
I mean, that's where I think that's like the major inciting incident for most religions is human beings are unique in the animal world in that we can contemplate well in advance the fact that we're not going to be around anymore. And I don't know about you, but that's an uncomfortable feeling for me and for most people, I think. So, anything that comes along and says, don't worry about it, there's something after this, or you're not really in control anyway, so just live your life and it's cool, that's all attractive to us.
No, absolutely. I mean, I was going to go into the, it's definitely a point. And to add on to that, it's that never ending battle, good versus evil, Satan versus God. It's a battle that'll never win. And, we see that with a lot of means of control in our society, where we look at like, oh, well, it's just a battle that's always going to happen. No one's ever going to agree to this thing, we're going to keep moving on. And it's continuously look for something, like, it's almost like delaying progress, because it's like, oh, we have to this battle that's always going to be here against these people who are always trying to keep us down is the thing, and we're just never going to get over it unless we beat them. And that them preventing us from seeing the world being flat, from developing NASA, is just been a whole thing to make us think that the world's a globe and that it's always been flat. I mean, that's one of the.
I think there's something to the idea. I mean, we originally come from the African savannah, and we're living in small groups, and we do, even though there is cooperation among human beings, instinctual cooperation among human beings, there's also intrinsic in us a sort of us and them, this dichotomy where there's always somebody else trying to mess with us or be against us or something. And it's hard for us to, look at others, whatever that other is, if it's sex, religion, national origin, color, whatever. It's easy for us to fall into this idea that whatever that other is against us and bad, and we need to somehow be against them.
It's a tough pill to swallow. I mean, we'll look at it now. I mean, I think vaccines is one of the, really peculiar ones. The advancement of just medicine from the discovery of penicillin just 100 years ago, and just looking at that in the correlation of population growth, I mean, is just, we can look at the just continuous linear movement. Like, we've been moving linearly, over the past, if you want to say, 1800 years, but now it's just like, it just skyrockets. And now we just get to a place of just an extreme comfort. Well, at least here in the United States, I think, our situation here is just so unique and special. And, in terms of like, it's the best on the planet. From going to a grocery store, I don't know if you've traveled the world, I'm sure you have, where it's like, oh, knowing where your food's going to come from on this day or the next day, like, and, it's just like, hey, yeah, I don't think we need these anymore. I think we've grown past this, and we can't have this interconnected planet with people moving and goods moving everywhere, because, I mean, things travel on fruit and food and just boxes and packages, and now people are fighting against this thing that's literally got us, one of the main movers to have got us where we are today. And
Yeah, I mean, you talk about vaccines. I mean, vaccines are one of the great success stories of modern science. And by modern science, I mean, the last couple hundred years or so. But in the 20th century alone, we've virtually eradicated polio. Smallpox is gone. Disease after disease are off our plates now. And I mean, when I was a kid, a lot of people had mumps and measles and all these diseases, and they were nasty diseases. And now all these people are coming forward, and they're challenging the vaccines, which incidentally got started from this idiot Andrew Wakefield in England, who led a lot of people to believe that autism and vaccines were somehow connected, which they are not, patently are not. And so it's formed all this fear of vaccines, and all these diseases are making a comeback now because of these people who don't understand how valuable vaccines are.
Yeah, I was actually reading Peter Hotez's book. I've been in contact with him to have him on the show. I know he's a tropical infectious disease doctor, and then works especially in vaccines. And I know his daughter even has autism and has no direct correlation, but he's still an advocate for vaccinations and vaccines, for the population. I mean, I just don't. Again, it's like, is there a lack of communication to people, or is it just, hey, we want to, I think you or one of the other scientists said on that Jubilee, hey, listen, you can't already have your conclusion and try and find all the pieces to match your conclusion. You need to start pre-conclusion. You need to start forming ideas and start finding proof to prove that this eventually will be the conclusion to your hypothesis. Like,
yeah,
where does that chain of thought come from?
Right, that's a tough thing to do. to go into something as neutrally as possible without your preconceived ideas. But that's where the best science is done, where you go in as neutral as possible, or at least aware of your biases, and go in and tackle the question based on that. Because I mean, I don't know. It's just we see it, and we deal with so many different things where people are under the misconception because they start with a misconception, and they only listen to evidence that fits their preconceived idea. And you can't do that if you're trying to arrive at the truth and do good science.
I mean, why is it important that, we continue to push for people to think a little bit more critically, or, do we just let this go to the wayside? I mean, what is it? We're like the pros and cons of, living in this digital world where anybody and everybody can now blast out a bunch of their preconceived notions, we'll call them.
Right. That's a great question, because it's as we've seen in the last couple of months with the COVID pandemic, it's a matter of life and death. If you want to sit there and believe that COVID-19 is a hoax, or any of the other 100 wacky ideas that are going out there, if you want to tell yourself that it's not real and it's the Democrats or the Chinese or whatever, go ahead, mix it up. Go lick a doorknob somewhere. Go to a place where COVID is rampant and see how you do. We've already seen examples of these pastors all over the United States who decided to defy the church meeting orders and have their services anyway. Dozens of them are dead now because they thought they were smarter than the doctors and the people at the CDC. So if you don't want to listen to modern science and all this other stuff, you're doing so at your own peril.
I mean, it's not even at your own peril. I don't think, a lot of, again, well, I think there's a bigger problem with, the value system of Americans. A lot of them don't travel. A lot of them don't actually get to see and interact with the rest of the world to know, what happens here reverberates in the rest of the world. The impact that we have here is, not even just, want to say like militarily, but, socially, creatively, culturally. Like, I've worked and lived in the Middle East, and it's just like, what happens here. I mean, from watching music festivals online, 13-year-old girls are like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever. I wish I could be there. I want to do these things. Like, it's those weird little subtleties that people don't realize. And now, like you're saying, like with the priest or preacher, listen, what you do may impact other people's lives. It's not just going to get you sick. And, we have this, very, very unique stubbornness here in the United States. There, short-sightedness to say, hey, it's all about the individual. It's about me, and I'm going to be better than someone else, or, I got to get someone out of my way anyways.
Right. Go to Syria, go to a township outside of Cape Town, South Africa, go to Bangladesh, and then look me in the eye and say, I can't survive not getting a haircut or going to the beauty shop for another 2 weeks or whatever. It's kind of pathetic in the way how ignorant people are about the standards big chunks of the rest of the world have to live in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but again, it's become, it's pointed towards that we have such a lack of trust and communication between us that, that we can have such a similar direction to where we have problems with as a people, no matter which side of political or social or cultural spectrums you're on. We don't have it pointing in the right direction as a collective together. There's reason to be mad and upset, but we're just not steering it all together and at the same direction to make that positive change, because those people are obviously mad for a reason. It's how can we make them look outside that and see that greater scheme and greater picture? It's tough. Does it start with education? Does it start with values? It's
Well,
I know you're working on this as a person.
I worry about the fact that there are large groups of people in this country who are actively spreading bad information to other people, and they have money and technological ability, and they have an agenda, and they're very actually good at what they do, and there's to some degree a lack of morality in what they do, and they just crank on. I just did I have the Center for Inquiry has a podcast called Point of Inquiry, and we just did an episode with some people who were involved in the Creation Museum and the Ark Experience, both in Northern Kentucky. And so these are two entities that have spent millions of dollars convincing that people that the dinosaurs and human beings live side by side, that the earth is 6,000 years old, and that humanity began with the 8 people on Noah's Ark and spread from that. And these are all demonstrably false notions. But these two institutions, all under the same leadership, have spent tens of millions of dollars to continuously convince people of their point of view. So that's what bothers me, that people with some power and some money are so actively spreading bad information.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I was laughing the entire time because I know exactly. Is that Ken Ham? Is that who we're talking about?
Ken Ham is the head of this group called Answers in Genesis, and yeah, they're the ones who built both of those things.
Could you give a little description real quick? Anybody doesn't know what is going on in Kentucky? Everything you explained right there.
Okay, yeah. So it raises my blood pressure every time, and I've been to both of these places, by the way. And boy, reaching into my pocket for a ticket to pay for a ticket for both of those things,
Hurts.
tough. It was tough. It hurt. It did. So the Creation Museum came first, and there are other creation museums in the country, but this one, it was really well done. I have to give them credit. I mean, they built these beautiful, big animatronic dinosaurs. So little kids go in these things and they just love it. But then it says that, the world is 6,000 years old. And, when Adam and Eve had their fall from grace, this is when animals started eating meat, and when evil started and lying started and everything. But the problem is there's just scientific fact after scientific fact that is misrepresented, or, their source for everything is the Bible. They don't care about geology or anything else. So that's the Creation Museum. Right down the road is a thing called the Ark Experience. It's a actual size model of Noah's Ark. And when I say actual, I mean the way it's written about.
It's massive.
I'm pretty sure there's no such thing as the actual Ark. But it's 500 and some feet long, and it's 4, 5, 6 stories tall, and it's this massive thing. And they just sort of rewrite all of geological history and all of evolutionary history and make up their own story about how animals, and they think dinosaurs went on the Ark, by the way, and somehow soon after they disembarked, went extinct. But it's just insane. But they've gotten millions of visitors.
Well, the humans were keeping the dinosaurs alive. It's until the dinosaurs turned their back on the humans. That's when it just went sour for them.
Yeah, right.
Like you said, it's sad that, like you said, tens of millions of dollars. I'm sure this is, a tax-exempt, tax write-offable business, because it's religious.
Not only that, but you make a good point. This is actually why I had these people on our podcast. They got a bunch of land donated to them, or for $1 or something, and they get these sales tax kickbacks from, it's either the county or the state of Kentucky, So you can make the argument, and we have, and a group called Americans United for Separation of Church and State actually sued them about this. They've gotten preferential treatment as a religious entity to put this monstrosity up. That's, by the way, completely scientifically inaccurate. So, you know, your tax dollars not only went to service somebody else's church, but it went to service a bunch of bogus scientific ideas. I'd be pissed if I lived in Kentucky. I'm pissed and I live in Los Angeles.
I mean, it's again, it's interesting. It's that idea of cherry picking what ideas you want to be right, what things you want to be wrong. I think what's one of the biggest outrages right now that people are upset that we have been putting $3 or $3.5 million in a certain infectious disease lab in Wuhan to study these diseases and viruses, and people are like, why are we spending money there? Why would we spend money on a disease that could potentially kill us all to learn about it, to know how to treat it? But this, that's fine. That's protecting people's First Amendment rights. This is, making sure that, not everybody has enough food on the table. We can't even feed enough people in this country. We have to make sure this organization, it's no better than, I think the problem with philanthropy in the country, for example, just like, oh, hey, this person's not going to pay taxes. They're going to pledge some money. I'm gonna take care of climate change one day. One day I'll take care of it. I pledge my money towards this. But well, why don't you just pay taxes? We created this republic 250 years ago that works beautifully. It's been sent out to the rest of the world, and other countries have taken on a democracy, and everything's great with it. But we're told it just doesn't work for the people. But a lot of rich and very well-off people, they can use it for themselves, and they can lobby the government to use it for their favor. But for everybody else, that's not good.
Well, we had an incident here in Los Angeles talking about wasted tax money. The LA Zoo, which is a pretty decent zoo, was building a monkey cage for these I think they're called golden monkeys that were being given to us by China. And so they built this like multi-million-dollar habitat for these monkeys, and they spent an extra $5,000 or $6,000 and having someone come in and use feng shui to arrange the monkey cage, to feng shui the habitat so the Chinese monkeys would be in harmony with the habitat. Now, feng shui is one of these ancient Chinese ideas that's, it's not based in any fact. There's no, no one who studies monkeys think that the monkeys care about feng shui, which direction the door faces or flow or any. We've done investigations about feng shui. There's nothing to it. It's as random as, I shouldn't say that. There's something to it, just like there's something to, having an architect design your house as opposed to, a 6-year-old kid. But it's just basic. That what I'm talking about is basic stuff. Feng shui is about luck and all these preconceived ideas. So I went to a board meeting for the LA Zoo, and I challenged them. You're spending $5,000 or $6,000 in tax money to bring someone in to feng shui this thing when there's nothing to it. So anyway, sometimes that's what we do, because we specialize in those smaller, wackier ideas that most scientists don't want to have to deal with.
Yeah. I don't mean to raise your blood pressure, but give me some other ones that really grind your gears. I think evolution's got to be one. People who literally go against, like we're talking about religion before.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, evolution. Any biologist, even a high school kid who's good at biology, should know that evolution is the unifying theory to all life on this planet in multiple different levels. So everything from DNA to the changing of structures, to the interaction of species, to what causes it, to viruses. I mean, viruses evolve every single year. That's why your flu shot is different this year from it is last year. So evolution, if you're studying life on this planet, you have to understand what evolution is to get a grip on it. And there are, tens of thousands of teachers in this country who are afraid to teach evolution because of blowback from religious people in their classes. That's why we have this program. Center for Inquiry has this program called TIES, the Teacher Institute for Evolutionary Studies, and it teaches teachers how to bring this to their students. But when I see people talk about the earth being 6,000 years old and it was all just created in 6 days or anything, there's just no science behind that.
It is interesting. I mean, I think about I learned biology in high school and I learned about it in college. I went to public school. I went to a private school as well. But I don't remember it still being pushed or taught too hard in those classes. I'm trying to remember when I took the AP biology. It wasn't probably my sophomore year, but it still kind of came like second nature. It was something that was not taught or not pushed for in school that hard,
Would they teach it explicitly or?
I mean, I don't remember direct, specifics, but I just don't remember it being I'm a person who is luckily was always interested in reading and interested about the world. I think you even had a story about, where does religion come from? And being raised Jewish growing up and being in Sunday school and just hold on. This is it? This is your story? This is being that young and just asking questions. I even have a podcast today. I'm 30 and I still run around the world having conversations with interesting people, wanting to learn more and more and more. That's never stopped, but I had to have learned this, from reading on my own and reading books or television, movies. I was a history major, so all that stuff was interesting to me, and it was there. I mean, you've heard about Charles Darwin. You heard about the what was his book? The Theory of Evolution. Is that it, or Evolution of Species?
Origin of Species.
Origin of Species. I was right there. I had all the words just scattered. So you just learned about it almost secondhand, and I just don't see why it's still pushed against. I mean, I know we have a vice president who is very adamant about where our education comes from and protecting the church and protecting the ideas that are based in the church. But how big of an issue is this still? How big of an issue is that people can't, how many states can you not actually learn this in?
Well, it's a huge issue because there are still millions and millions of Americans who think the earth is 6 or 10,000 years old, that evolution is baloney. I mean, when you start eroding these scientific ideas on a massive scale, and by the way, we're practically unique in the Western world about this. Europe and Russia and China and India and most of the rest of the world doesn't have the level of belief in creationism that the United States does. But what happens, the danger with all that is you start injecting this fundamental disbelief or mistrust of the scientific consensus. And once you have a mistrust of the scientific consensus, you get exactly what we're experiencing right now during the pandemic. You're getting people not listening to the CDC, going outside without masks, doing everything the way they think they should do it and not what the scientists say they should be doing. And it's blown up in their faces and they're dying by the thousands.
Well, I mean, the flu kills 70,000. We've lost 90,000 people in three months. Those numbers make sense.
Yeah.
I don't get it either. I mean, I don't get it. I mean, it's either those deaths are all lies, and I don't get it. I mean, it's either those deaths are all lies, and I don't get it. I mean, it's either those deaths are all lies, and I don't get it. I mean, it's either those deaths are all lies, and I don't get it. I mean, it's either those deaths are all lies, and I'm brainwashed by the CDC and, the people who have studied this their entire lives, who apparently have been pushing to be in these positions of power in order to one day be in control with Donald Trump as president and in cahoots, just bring the whole thing down and start killing people because of population control.
and kill. Yeah, that's what's the count at 80,000 right now. I mean,
90.
that's kind of it's 90 already. Yeah,
Yeah.
it just in this country. Um,
Just in this country. Yeah.
that's I mean, we hear that from people who believe in chemtrails. So, for those of you who don't know, the belief is when you see those white streaks up in the sky that airplanes leave, those aren't contrails. This is the belief. This isn't the truth. Those aren't contrails, they're chemtrails. And there's actually devices on that are installed in the airplanes that are spraying out chemicals that are either killing the citizens of this country, or they're spraying some sort of mind altering drugs or whatever. Who even knows? It's so insane. So that people believe that there's no one in the airline industry who is complicit in this, who is willing to come forward and say, that's not really what those things are. There's been a zillion explanations about how contrails form, when atmospheric conditions are right, the pressure comes out of the back of the jets and it's moisture and blah, blah, blah. The science is clear and easy, but it doesn't stop thousands of people from thinking that there's this conspiracy to kill our own people or mind meld. I don't even knows our own people. It's
Yeah.
just so mind-boggling.
I just never understood that one where it'd be like, well, don't all these other, rich or wealthy people live in and around the area? Like, how do we know it's not going to fall to this part of the sky
Yeah,
and the
right.
wind's going to take it this way? I mean, especially how much wind is impacted. You just go 50 or 100 feet up in the air. I mean, there's so much more wind to know which wind pattern is going to take what this way, and they're dropping that 40,000 feet in the sky.
Yeah, you couldn't
I
control
mean,
it. Right.
there's a lot.
Well, this is
And
the
okay,
same
but
question we ask the flat earthers. If the earth is flat and the US government and every government in the world that has been to space, so they all know, and all the other governments who help patrol the ice wall that the flat earthers think is at the Antarctic, the edge of Antarctica is actually an ice wall, which is holding in the world's oceans from spilling off the side. If all these people are in cahoots about this, and it would be thousands and thousands and governments and all sorts of things. The question is, why would people do this? Why? What is the point of hiding this fact from the world's population? And no one has an answer. They think it's we wouldn't be able to handle the idea or whatever. And
yeah,
I don't know.
it's just the truth. It's the truth. They
It's
don't
the
want you to
truth.
know the truth. That's the
Yeah,
problem.
but
They don't.
yeah. So anyway, it's our mountain of things. I mean, we've been doing this. My investigations group offers $250,000 for anyone who can prove paranormal ability. So uh, we've been testing people for coming for 20 years now. And obviously, no one has ever won the prize yet. But people, just this week, we got people coming forward, sending us pictures from their security cameras, which they are convinced are ghosts or spirit, but are probably just drops of water and spider webs. And they just keep coming, and people just want to believe in this stuff.
Yeah, I wanted to get into that. It wasn't $1 million. I think one of your prizes now, or is it at 250,000?
Well, James Randi, who used to be a part of our organization, had $1 million prize for a long time, uh, 15 or 20 years, something like that. Um, that prize has been inactive for some time now. They haven't tested anyone. So I think our prize is the largest in the world right now. But yeah, it's based on the same thing. We learned a lot from Randy and his testing methods and how he set his test up. And it's just out there, and anyone who wants to come and show us the goods and prove that they can see into the future or move something without touching it or any number of different things, read somebody's mind, that money's just sitting there. And you would think that if someone really had the ability, they'd be able to come and ace this thing in no time and take our money.
Why haven't they? Why has nobody been able to prove, whether it's paranormal activity to a lot of these conspiracies? You know, how does their belief stay so strong, and how does it keep pushing, everything else? Because I don't want to say it's mental disease. I don't want to say it because, we're all allowed to be skeptics, and we're all skeptical in our own way. But what is it that's driving these people to, either not back their claims up or their quote unquote proof to what they believe in or what they think they can do?
Some of it is mental illness. Some of these people are hearing voices and seeing things that are clearly not there. So there is, and I wouldn't even venture a guess on the percentage. We've had psychologists and psychiatrists on our investigations team before, and it's pretty obvious that some of these people are experiencing symptoms of mental illness. The other people who think that they have these abilities are a variety of different things. Some are a little bit delusional. Some of them are remembering their successes and forgetting their misses. It's the old story of your phone rings or something, and it's your friend Bill, and you knew it was going to be your friend Bill. I just knew it was going to be you, and that tells some people that they have some paranormal ability. When in fact, you might have thought Bill was going to call the last 40 times your phone rang, and it was really only number 41 that it was actually him. And now you think you have paranormal ability, but you forgot that you missed the last 39 or 40 or whatever. So that's part of it. It depends on the claim. I mean, there is a claim like some people think dowsing is real. This is the idea where you take a couple of rods or a witching stick and you can walk up and down on the ground, and the rods or the witching stick will cross in front of you when you come over whatever you're looking for. Usually it's water. People use dowsing to try to find oil or gold or all kinds of different things.
I've seen your story with the gentleman up in the Napa Valley who was
Yeah,
claiming
right.
we could do that with water because he has a big wine farm and he claims he had success before. But it's just like with gambling. Like, oh yeah, I mean, I won.
Well,
I won last time.
it's not even gambling. Yeah, that was one of the Mondavi brothers from Mondavi Wines is a believer in dowsing. But I mean, I asked a geologist, like up in Napa Valley, for instance, what are your odds of hitting water if you're a dowser? And he's like, practically 100%. It's a valley. The water goes from the hills into the valley. There's water soaked into that ground. It's just a matter of how deep you go, not if it's there. It's everywhere. You'd have a harder time drilling and not finding water than you would finding water. So he thinks because he's had success drilling for water in Napa Valley that he has this ability, and it's not an ability.
Yeah, it's tough. And then you realize he charges people for this, and he goes all around the country, the world, and he's like, oh yeah, I can do this for you. There's no guarantee though. If I come to where you are, and yeah, it's $500. Yeah, I'll show up for an hour. It's a great hourly rate right there. Nuts.
Yeah, you might as well throw a dart at a map, and you'd have just as much luck, and that's free.
77% chance of water. My next question: did you go to college? Are you college educated?
Yeah, I went 2 years to junior college to College of DuPage outside of Chicago, and then I finished my 4 year degree at a place called DePaul University in Greencastle, Indiana.
Okay, nice, nice. Um, yeah, I think it's interesting. I think people don't realize that. I think only 33% of people in the U.S. have college degrees, and there's this weird becoming social divide of people who who have been educated or who are educated, and like you said, it's getting to that point where we don't want to trust the people who have either been put to the rigor. And I have my own biases against college, even though I went, I got an education, what it cost and what it's doing to my generation. I'm not the biggest fan of. However, going to a prep school and high school to we had our feet held to the fire to the threat of expulsion if you didn't cite or footnote like where you got your information from. And if this idea was not an original idea, they would threaten you with expulsion. And it was like, oh shit, I can't cheat on this paper. I can't just copy and paste this. And that is like one strong value I know I've got from my education is, after that and then going to college and writing those 35, 40 page history papers, to graduate, it's like, well, I got to make sure, I write this thing about, Italy and fascism in 1914 and 1945, and I got to put this original idea together, and then create this original idea about it. Like that has been done so much credit to, looking at the world in a very, very open lens to say, oh, well, maybe this is why this happens. Oh, this is why this happens. Asking questions. And, I feel like that is the level that we're not holding other people to either because they never went through that experience or they didn't go to college. I'd say most of the generation, even my parents didn't go to college, it's like fighting with them now. Just like, guys, you can't just send this YouTube video over. Like, where'd you get this from? If you read this? Have you read that? Is this .net you're sending me this from? Like, who is this guy? Where does he get his information from? Like, is there something more to it? Or again, it's like, I feel like that's one of the biggest things missing is just holding people accountable.
Yeah, right. And that's, I mean, if you learn one thing in college, I would hope people would learn that all sources are not equal. And there's plenty of people who went to college who believe in wacky things.
Of course.
It's not a vaccine for dumb ideas, but it does. I think it could or should expand your horizons a little bit, and so you see a little bit a wider breadth of the world and understand that there are certain standards that should be met to accept something as true. People talk about fake news and all this stuff, but I mean, I would say, sources like the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal and the Chicago Trib and LA Times and the Christian Science Monitor, any of these publications that are staffed with professional journalists have some degree of credibility, certainly better than some blogger who just decides to put a blog up, or some YouTuber who knows how to use a camera and an editing system. There are standards and there are techniques to gathering information and putting it back out there that are higher than just anybody.
It's like you said with the YouTuber thing. Like, I've had a few on the show. One's a good friend of mine, and he's got like probably like a million person reach. And I had him on the show, and just we just get into it all the time. There's nothing against him, but just like we'll start going, and he's taking like a 2015 Bill Gates speech, and he's just saying, "See, he's trying to kill people," and I'm just like, population control is a little bit more than that. I don't think that we have a problem right now feeding 7.5 billion people on our planet. We have a hard time making sure people have even a place to sleep and live and not be sick. We have the privilege here to just say, oh, he's just trying to kill all of us. Like, that's even a little far-fetched, man. Maybe it's a little more than that. Maybe our planet can't sustain this many people. You know, do you think we can sustain this many people? Like, let's think a little bit more. So it's not just that. It's what we talked about earlier. It's like people throwing their beliefs and ideas, because he'll take like a PBS article and say, see, and it's like, nah, there's more to it. You know, this isn't the final definitive answer. And I think, you know, again, the unique thing about those journals or people that have credibility is that they always do, you know, retake articles or take things down when, you know, they're incorrect, or apologize for things. You know, the guy standing in front of the sun with the sun exploding behind him on a green screen and a camo hat, who says he's got the news and information that's going to tear down the establishment.
Why should you believe that guy? Yeah. I mean, people don't I know people who think that it's because it's a website or because it's a YouTube video that there must be something to it. And it's just simply not the case. Anybody can, that's the problem with that's the downside of the double edge of the internet sword, is that anybody can put up any idea. And if you know how to design a website, and if you're slick at production and everything, it looks just as good, and it may even look better. I mean, in the case of the Creation Museum, there's real museums out there that don't have the resources that Ken Ham put together for the Creation Museum. So little kids come in there and they're like, wow, this is awesome. This must be true if it's such high quality. But it's not. It's a high quality sham. And sometimes, you know, science isn't as good at the packaging of things as people who stand to make a buck from it.
No, completely. Like you said, this is like it's actually a battle of ideas. It's a battle of thought and values. And yeah, I mean, just being able to still have that ability in government, which I think more and more people are getting a little bit fed up with, just to say like, wait, why is this group tax exempt? Why don't they pay taxes? I think the Church of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, is like one of the most interesting ones. I think they have $80 billion in holdings and real estate. I mean, it's insane. $80 billion. That's its own little like nation state. Sure. And they literally have their own state where they kind of run the show for whoever may live there. God forbid you know. I mean, again, some of the nicest people. They are very nice. Love visiting Utah and being there, but like it's. I mean, just.
Yeah, I mean, you got. I mean, the Catholic Church is, I think, the biggest individual landowner in the world. You got Scientology right down the street from us. They have multiple buildings in downtown Hollywood that are mostly empty most of the time. And the city and the county aren't collecting a dime of real estate taxes from them. They bought this property up cheap, and they're doing that all over the country, all over the world. And it's a massive waste, and it makes local government even tougher because there's voids in the tax base.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like Scientology had a good pushback in terms of like, you know, other people pushed back. They said, hey, what's going on there? The people who left, the stories that came out about what they were doing kind of had them retreat a little bit. But I mean, like you said, I mean, once they already own all that land and they're not paying taxes on it, you know, hey, you know, what was so unique what they did, I don't know if a lot of people know the story, is, you know, how they blackballed or blackmailed a lot of people at the IRS to get that tax exempt status. And
yeah, that's its own story that, they had this backdoor campaign to achieve tax-free status. And that's exactly what they did. They blackmailed a bunch of officials and got it pushed through. And it's hurting all of us. I mean, frankly, I would tax all religion something, especially the property they own. So it's not just Scientology, but they're big offenders. Yeah.
I mean, completely. I mean, it's so unique that these religious organizations, I wouldn't even say all like religious, I'm going to use another religious organization, the Church of Satan or Satanism, when they always win those cases because it's like, hey, well, if you guys want the 10 Commandments here, we got to have the statue of Satan right next to it. And the Constitution, people don't realize how great of a document it is. Like when it's actually practiced and looked at, like, all right, you guys want this here. We're going to have everything else here because we don't want any violation of anybody's individual rights. And it's so beautiful when that happens. Just to say like, oh, you'd hope it'd point out to people like, maybe we're being a little silly here.
Well, and again, we've been involved in some of these fights too. And I mean, if it's not that we hate Christians or Scientologists or any other religion. We just think that the U.S. government should not be in the business of any kind of religion. You shouldn't have the 10 Commandments or any other religious crosses, any other religious symbols on public property. And then if you do, that's when it gets to like what you were just talking about. Then you open the floodgate and you should have Satan should be up there. The flying spaghetti monster should be up there, and any other wacky idea qualifies.
I know we're getting up on time, so I want to talk a little bit more about the center here in LA. What you guys do over there. I know you guys said you had a podcast, and even for me, what can people do to get involved? How can I get involved? I think you guys are right here in Filipino Town.
Yeah, we're on Temple Street in Filipino Town.
You're down the street from me. I live right here in Echo Park. So.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, well, when we start cranking up our events after the pandemic, in the past we've had lectures a couple of times a month or once a month. We have book clubs. We have our investigations group. We do all kinds of work here and in other parts of the country and the rest of the world. Defending the rights of secular people and have this pro-science orientation. And it's a place where you could come and meet people who aren't going to ask you what church you go to or what temple you go to. And they're certainly not going to ask you what sign you are or any of that stuff. And it's kind of a community center for people who are based in science and reason.
Yeah, that's usually one of my calling cards. You go on a date and a woman just like, oh, what's your sign? Just like, oh, this is not going to go well.
Man, yeah.
You're going to ask which gravitational pull from which constellation in the sky was more than this one or that one. Like,
yeah, and then watch her eyes glaze over when you make that point. I've been there, brother. I've been there.
The other one I wanted to still ask you was, what is the difference between providing rights and a place for secularism and the difference between infringing upon religious groups? Like, how do you differentiate that, and how do people like either see that or don't see that from what you guys may or may not do?
Yeah, it mostly has to do with the weight of government. So if the weight of government is behind a prayer of a certain religion in school, if it's a display of a certain religion on public grounds, if it's advocating certain ideas that a certain religion, to the exclusion of other perspectives, adhere to, then that's when we have a problem. If you want to go to church every Sunday or temple or wherever, I don't care who you pray to or what you do, but don't use the power of the U.S. government or any government in the world to suppress the ideas of groups, other religions, non-religious people, anyone who disagrees with the majority. Do not use the power of those governments for the advancement of a particular religion. So that's mostly when we talk about separation of church and state, that's what we're talking about. Put your cross in your front yard. Put your Star of David on your door. I don't care. Just don't put it at City Hall. Don't make me pray in school or before the mayor makes his announcement.
Yeah. No, James, this was great. I already have the name of the show. I loved the quote you did. All sources are not equal. That
Yeah.
was solid. That was solid. So thank you so much. Looking forward to connect and doing a show in person when this is all over. And thank you to everybody who had tuned in. Go check out the Center for Inquiry. James heads up the one out here in LA. In the West one, there's one in DC, and there's one in Chicago, if I remember. Am I correct?
I think they're a little dormant right now in Chicago. We're working on that.
Okay. But go check them out online. They have a great online presence on Twitter and on their website. And yeah, guys, go ahead and subscribe to the show. Got plenty of more shows coming. This is episode 30 of the Bus Driver Experience. We got another show live on Wednesday. Former college basketball teammate Renzo Nwaku. I don't think we have any planned after that. I got to start scheduling those up, but there are plenty of shows we just cranked out in the past week, like 2 or 3. A bunch of former basketball teammates from Syracuse, a lot of Syracuse basketball players on the show recently. But yeah, guys, thanks for tuning in. Remember to get out there. Whatever it is you want to do, it's just a question away. You just got to take that first step. So find out, ask someone who knows more than you. Go figure out, go fail at something. It's what life's all about. You're going to learn. It's the only way you can learn. And we're out. James, thank you again.
Thanks, Brandon.
Don't hang up. I'm just going to stop.